Hi folks, this is Karim Raouf from IT Visualizer channel. We will continue our lab, the Red Alert Labs, the video number 103. We have been discussing in the previous video the following. We have been working now for 14 videos on discussing the documentation of the CIS Critical Security Controls version 8, which is provided by the organization of Center for Internet Security. And this organization is focusing on issuing documentations and recommendations for securing or discussing the security issue, especially securing operating systems, securing applications, and one of these subjects is to protect yourself against cybersecurity attacks. So this documentation from the CIS list some points through which we can protect ourselves against cybersecurity attacks. We have been working now on this documentation for 14 videos. We have discussed until now 5 points for securing yourself against cybersecurity attacks. The first point is to, in brief of course, the first point is to create inventory for your enterprise assets hardware. This includes computers, PCs, laptops, phones. The second point is to make an inventory of your enterprise assets software. This includes, not limited to, operating systems, applications, operating systems, Windows 10, Windows 11, Linux distros, Mac OS, whatsoever, and applications like Adobe Reader, like Office, like so and so. The third point is to protect your data, and we have discussed how we can protect our data when it is in rest and when it is in transit. And the fourth point is to secure configuration of your enterprise assets, hardware and software, and this mainly focus on hardening the different initial configurations for your softwares and your hardware. So we all know that every operating system comes with an initial configuration. This initial configuration opens a lot of services and a lot of rights that are sometimes excessive and sometimes need to be tweaked, because some hackers can take advantage of some of these excessive services or excessive rights. So we need to harden most of our configurations for most of our devices. And not only that, we need also to save and maintain a database for the different configurations for our different enterprise assets, hardware or software. So this was the fifth point. I think the fourth point. The fifth point was to secure or to something called account management. We need to have a good control and monitor over all of our accounts in all of the domain, or all of the network, or all of our network. Of course, this includes Windows users or Windows accounts and application accounts. So this applies to both. We need to monitor and control the different user accounts on different platforms, on Active Directory, on, for example, a financial application, on maybe an human resources application. So all of these we need to concentrate on account management for these different platforms. And what we mean by account management, to take care of the password policy for these accounts. We need to have a good password policy for all of our accounts in different applications and in different platforms. We need also to see if some of these accounts have special rights. We need to monitor these accounts very, very close. So if a user have an administrative account, or a person have an administrative account, we need to monitor and log the activity of these accounts. All of this was discussed in the previous videos. Please refer to it. So today we are talking not about account management. Today we are talking about account privileges. Okay, so they are related to each other. So account management is related to account rights. These are linked together because some accounts have some rights and they are linked together. So today we are talk about the sixth point today, which is account privileges management. Let me see here, what is this? This is called account control management. So here we by meaning account control management, this means the rights assigned to the user or assigned to the account. So let me open the PDF here to just take a brief note about, or take a brief description about it. So let's see. So here if we go to the sixth point, which is not account management, we have account control management. So here he say use processes and tools to create, assign, manage and revoke access, credentials and privileges for user, administrator and service accounts for enterprise assets and software. So he says that you need to control the rights and passwords assigned to different groups and users. Okay, and he is here concentrating on that some privileges are very risky, so you need to be very sure when you are assigning a certain user high privileges or high rights. This should be monitored and should be limited to certain servers or certain applications. So for example, let me get it from the start. Most of us, or most of the operating systems, come with something called default users and default groups, and these default groups sometimes have these default groups are assigned default user rights or default privileges. So for example, if we go to the Windows server or in the Active Directory, let me show you something here. So for example, if you have installed Windows 10, this on my PC has Windows 10. If you go there and tell him manage, you will see that there is some groups that are assigned certain privileges. Sometimes these privileges are normal privileges, and sometimes they are sensitive and excessive privileges. So let's for example see here groups. So here we can see that there is a lot of groups that are assigned, or the users that are members of these groups are assigned different default privileges. So for example, here we can see that administrators have full control over the machine. Backup operators have backup rights on the machine. Event log readers, this group have some read rights on the event log, which contains, or which we can call the black box of the Windows operating system. So we can see there is a lot of groups that are assigned different privileges, and this sometimes may be called roles. Maybe not in Windows, in any application you see there is something called role or user roles. These user roles, in short, these are default privileges that are assigned to default groups. So for example, maybe in a financial application there is a group called for example account payable groups or account payable group. This account payable group, if you put an accountant in this group through this financial application, then we will have account payable rights on the financial application. For example, he will not be able to have, for example, account receivable rights. This is for the accounting team, I mean. So every application, including the operating systems, have default roles or default groups that are assigned default rights. Sometimes these rights are suitable for the role of the user or for the mission of the user. So for example, in our financial application, maybe a group called account payable group. If any accountant is a member of this group, then he have account payable rights on the financial application. So it's only limited to a certain mission or certain jobs he can do on the financial application. But for example, if I put an accountant in another group in this financial applicator called financial manager, then he will have a lot of rights. and it is a good practice not to put one user in two groups. So for example, it's not if his job requires that. So for example, maybe I don't want a user that is assigned account payable rights to be at the same time have rights to be account receivable. It's something in the accounting terms. The one that collects the payments will not be the one to be recording the payments. Okay, so a person should issue the payments and someone or another one to collect the payments. But to make to make one person to have both rights to collect and issue the payments, this is also a security right. So what, from this point, what I'm talking about, you need to only assign rights or based on a need to know base or based on your business needs. So for example, in our scenario or Windows, maybe a user needs to run a program, so you give him administrative rights by putting him in the administrators group. This happens a lot when you have a laptop, okay, and a user which is not inside your network is traveling with this laptop, and he needs to install programs and put some USB or external hard disk on his laptop. So this is not done by the limited user account, so he needs to be an administrator to do this. So you simply put in the laptop, in the local group, in the administrators on the laptop, put him in this group. So here he take excessive rights. He will now can be able to do anything to the laptop. So this is not a best practice. A best practice is to always assign rights based on the job of the user. Okay, so this is one thing we need to take into consideration. So again, this point is called account control management. What we mean account control management? We mean here to control the rights and or especially the rights assigned to the user to be only based upon what he do exactly. Okay, and most of the applications and the operating systems are included come with certain predefined privileges. These privileges are linked to some groups. So for example, here we cannot see, for example, just a moment. So for example, if I need a user to only install programs, here I cannot see a group, okay, that I can put the user in so he can only install programs. This was in the past, this power users group can do this, but today I don't have something like this. So if you need a user only to install programs, it is not a best practice to put him in administrators. Even though there is no built-in group that you can put the user in to give him only install rights, but it is not wise to put him or to give him all of the rights. So again, every system comes with a predefined groups that are linked to it, predefined privileges. So we need to take very to be very cautious when we are putting some users in a built-in groups with pre-built-in privileges. So here he is concentrating on this. We need always to take care or to always manage the user rights that we give to any account. And by the way, it's also a best practice when you have any operating system or any application, you need to have a very good documentation of the default rights for every system. So for example, I need to have a PDF to illustrate which group have which rights. This is for the Windows. For the financial application, you need also to have documentation describing which group in this financial application can do what. So this is also a best practice. We need to have a documentation of all of the user rights in all of our operating systems and application, and you need to revise these rights every quarter, and to see which users have these rights, or the members of these groups. We need to revise them. Maybe for example, some user was left the property, or some user we have raised him or we have promoted him to another position that needs different rights, so we need to move him from one group to another. So we need to revise the rights and divide the members of the groups that are linked to these rights. So this is also one thing we need to concentrate on. So as an IT, when you come to any organization, you need to see all of the applications and all of the operating systems in this place, and then see the different groups in every operating system and every application, and see the rights linked to these groups and revise them and see which user have which right. And again, we need to have a process when we need to revoke, or we need to remove some rights from a user. This should be done adding users rights or remove user rights. This should be done from a centralized location, and this should be done in an automated way if we can do this, or it will be done in a safe way and clear way. So again, this point, account management process or account management control we are talking about now, is to control the rights assigned to the users, revise them, revoke them if needed, promote them if needed. So all of these are the things we need to concentrate on, and to monitor if there is some groups that have some excessive rights. We need to monitor these groups. We have talked about this in the previous point about account management. If someone have administrative rights on a certain system or application, we need to log his activity just to make sure that everything is correct and everything is right. So for example, here we can see this is the default rights for different groups in the Windows 10. Okay, this is the rights of different groups on this machine. This is Windows 10. We will see this in the Active Directory. I have another one for the Active Directory. Another thing I need to stress on, if you go to the local group policy, let me show you something here. If you go to the gpedit.mse, you will see here that there is a section, okay, in the Windows setting and in security setting and in local policies, user rights assignments. Here we can see this is the different rights, okay, or the different privileges or the different setting the user can do on this machine. So for example, to adjust the time zone, okay, this is a right on the machine to change the time zone on the machine. This is assigned to the local administrators group. So this is some rights assigned to some groups. Here you can play with these rights. So for example, I can remove a certain user or a certain group not to change the time zone. So this is also one thing. This is how you can control the rights given to a user. So you use groups and then assign these rights to the groups, or sometimes these rights are built in or assigned to the groups automatically. You cannot change them. So for example, in some applications, maybe you are not able to change the rights or privileges linked to a certain group. Maybe it's not available. But mostly when you have an application or you have an operating system, you need to have the flexibility to assign and remove rights as per the business need. Okay, but sometimes maybe for example for the administrator account in special, in most of these applications we cannot change the rights assigned to him, okay, because there should be a user that have 4 rights, but to control the administrator and to limit it to certain users. So the administrator is a very powerful user, okay, we cannot remove from him the rights. We need a user like this, but we need to limit these rights to very limited users, and if we do this we need to monitor their activity. So this is one of the things we need to stress on. So these are the rights, and by the way this is in Windows 10 and Windows Server, so we can control the rights assigned to the groups from this section. So let's see also, I need to see something here concerning, or let me show you the rights of built-in Active Directory groups. So let's go there and show you a little bit of a website. If we go there, Chrome, and let me show you this Okay, so these are the built-in groups in the Active Directory. So for example, there is a group called account operators. This grants limited account creation privileges to a user. So if you put a user in this built-in Active Directory group, the user can create Active Directory accounts. He can do this. Okay, so here we can see there is different groups and they have different built-in privileges. This is a good thing. So if you need to give a user a right to create an account but not to manage the Active Directory in whole as a whole, so you can put him in the account operators. Okay, so again, we need to take very good consideration and plan all of the user rights in our environment, and to document these rights and to revise these rights. Okay, and if we have the flexibility to change these rights, we can do this. Okay, so we can see, for example, here's a lot of things. There's a lot of groups and every group do certain things. So for example, here, let's take this one. For example, here the backup operators, they are assigned the backup process. So you can, if you need someone to backup your machine, so you need to put him in this group, and we can see here that he's assigned the rights to allow login locally, backup files and directories, login as batch if this is a program that needs to run remotely, or to run a script to backup a job or to backup a file, restore files and directories, shut down the system. So all of these, let me show you all. If you go again to the local GP edit, if we go again to Windows setting, and then we go to security, and then local, and then we go to the user rights, here we can see that allow, let me show you all here if we can go there. So we can see here that allow login locally, or let's go, let me get it further out here, for example, like this. So here allow login locally, if we go to the rights or the user rights, we can see here that allow login locally, the groups assign this the backup operators. So to backup a machine, you need to have the right to login to a machine. Okay, and for example, to backup files and directories. So all of these groups take these rights, or these rights are linked to certain groups. So here we can change it, or we can change the groups linked to these rights. So this is very, very critical thing, and this should be done in every application. So it's not only in the Windows 10 or Windows Server. This also should be a standard for all of the applications in your network: financial application, human resources application, camera, if you have certain MVR or something. Most of them you should have the ability to change the rights assigned to different groups, or if they have built-in roles or user roles, that these user roles have built-in rights that cannot be changed, then you should be very careful who takes what. And I prefer that these built-in roles, you can change their rights, or you can create custom roles and assign to them different rights or custom rights. So for example, maybe I do not find here a group that fits my need. So for example, I need a group, through it I can allow the user to install programs. Okay, this is not anywhere in Windows 10 or Windows Server. There was a group in the old days called power users. It gives you the right to install programs only, but this was now removed. So if I need to give a user the installation right on a PC, how can I do this? In Windows you don't find something, or example, if you open the rights here, there is no something called here. Let me show you all. If we go again to the Windows and we go to the security, go to the local policies and user rights assignments, here we cannot find something called install programs. So we don't have something like this. So we are here in a dilemma: how I can let a user install programs on a machine, and don't and by not giving him the administrator rights, because the administrator rights have the privilege to install programs. I need only the user to install programs, not to manage the machine as a whole. So this is a problem. Windows doesn't give you here this flexibility. Okay, but it is always a good thing to have an application or have an operating system that gives you this this flexibility in changing rights. Anyway, so let's see the recommendations of the CIS, how to account or to have your account management process. Let me return back here and see what are these, or account control management. Let's see here what he says about this process. He's saying here that, for example, the first recommendation is to establish and follow a process, preferably automated, for granting access to enterprise assets upon new hire. If you have a new employee hire, rights granted or role change of user. So when you hire a new employee, you need to give him some rights, and when he is promoted or his job is changed, maybe he is promoted in his department, for example, maybe accountant is promoted to be a financial manager, then he need more rights, or maybe he is shifted completely from one department to another, then we need to change the rights and roles assigned to this user. So we need to have an automated process for doing this. I think in my organization we don't have something like this, but the IT is responsible for shifting and changing and assigning the rights. Okay, and this is done through the tools provided to us as an IT, maybe from the Active Directory to assign rights, or maybe from the application itself. Inside it there is a tool to assign rights. Okay, but this is done manually, not in an automated way. Anyway, establish an access revoking process. This is opposite of granting, so you need to have an automated process to grant users different rights based on their job and their role. And you need also to have an automated process to revoke these rights. Establish and follow a process, preferably automated, for revoking access to enterprise assets through disabling accounts immediately upon termination, rights revocation or role change of a user. Disabling accounts instead of deleting accounts may be necessary to preserve all the trails. So he's saying here there should be an automated way to disable accounts upon termination of the user. If there is something automatic to disable the account after the user leaves the property, or maybe he have a termination, or he resigned, for example, there is something, an automated process to do this. Maybe, for example, you have a rule, or you do something that if an account is inactive for a certain amount of time, then it should be disabled, for example. Okay, and you need also to revoke some rights because the user is promoted to another position, so you need to revoke him from a group or a certain group with certain rights and put them in another group with other rights. Okay, and he's saying sometimes you need only to disable the account, not to delete it, because for some audit trails or to audit this account, for example, we have said in the previous point, for account management we need to delete the user sometimes if he is not active for maybe 60 days or 45 days. Sometimes the delete option is not an option, or it's not something we can do, because this account need to be audited, or we need to get logs on this account. So these two things, we need to have an automated process for granting rights, an automated process for revoking rights, and then we require MFA for externally exposed application. If you have an application outside your network and you are accessing this application outside your network through a username and a password, this process should be protected, because this application outside your network or on the internet is available for hacking. So you need to protect it and protect the access to it. He's saying that if you have an application exposed to the internet, then you should use the MFA or multi-factor authentication to secure the connection to this externally exposed application. So for example, maybe you have an HR application that it is on the cloud and the users can access it from home or from other places. So you need to secure the access to this HR application by using MFA. MFA is very simple, that you are not granted access or logged into an application based on your username and password, but by providing a code or a code sent to you on your mobile, or by a flash maybe, or maybe a dongle or something. But this is mostly MFA. It is by sending a code to your mobile and provided it to the application along with your username and password, so you can access the application. And this is especially done when you have an application that are exposed to the internet. Okay, this is one thing. And also this MFA should be also applied to remote network access. If you are accessing a network, for example, if you are at home and you are trying to access your network remotely through a VPN or through something, you should use a VPN to secure the connection and use the MFA also to access the network remotely, not only through your username and password. Okay, so you should do MFA for remote network access, for accessing externally exposed applications. This is thing. And you should also use MFA for administrative access. So the MFA also should be applied for user accounts that have administrative rights. You should use MFA with this kind of accounts. Okay, so MFA is, we can see here that it will be largely deployed in most of the organizations, because it is a way to secure access to different resources by providing two things or two methods for authentication, not only the username and the password, but maybe a code or something called OTP sent to your mobile, or through a dongle. Sometimes it's like a security key, which we call UBI key or something. I don't remember the name exactly. So this is a way we need to secure access to different resources using the MFA. Okay, and to protect the accounts that have excessive rights or administrative rights, we need to secure them by using the MFA. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 6th point, establish and maintain inventory of authentication and authorization systems. So you need to have a list about what the systems that are responsible for authorizing users to access different resources. Maybe, for example, the domain controller, he is responsible for authorizing and authenticating users to access the domain and use different services in the domain, file server, whatsoever. So we need to maintain something like this. If you have a Radius server, if you have different systems that its responsibility is to authenticate or authenticate a user and to authorize a user. Okay, maybe this is not only a Windows system or domain control, maybe sometimes it's a Linux operating system. So you need to have or establish and maintain an inventory of authentication and authorization systems. He is saying that establish and maintain an inventory of the enterprise authentication and authorization systems, including those hosted on site or remote service provider. Review and update the inventory at minimum annually or more frequently. So we can see here that he is stressing on the process of assigning rights to users and groups and protect these rights, okay, or to protect using these rights by users, okay, protect them in a remote situation or in an exposed application to the internet. These are all things we need to concentrate on. Okay, so until now we have reached this point. Then centralized access control, we need to have a centralized location to manage all of the rights from. Okay, so this is a very, very logical thing to think of. To have, for example, the Active Directory, it is a centralized tool. Through it we can manage the accounts and manage the rights assigned to the accounts. Okay, and this should be done from for any application the same. If you have a financial application, you need to have a tool to manage all of the accounts in this financial application and the rights assigned to them, maybe from the application server. Okay, this is one thing. The last point, define and maintain role-based access control. Define and maintain role-based access control to determining and documenting the access rights necessary for each role within the enterprise. So here again he is stressing on that you need to have a documentation for every role in your network. So for example, in the accounting team you need to have the roles in this department. Maybe there is account payable personnel, there is account receivable personnel, here is the cashier, there is the income auditor, there is, for example, night auditor. All of these are roles and jobs within the department, and every one of these roles and every one of these kinds of jobs needs certain rights. They need to be documented and known, and we need to make sure that when he is accessing the financial application, that his job role is related to his access on the financial application. As we said before, for example, we don't need to give an account payable personnel the rights for an account receivable personnel. Account payable is the one for issuing the invoices, and the account receivable is the one for collecting these payments. Okay, so these are two different persons. If there is one person doing two jobs, this is called conflict of interest. So maybe we cannot control something like this. So for example, maybe an account payable, if a person is having an account payable right and account receivable right, so maybe he can issue a fake payable invoice and receive it, and this all is done and no one can control it. So no, we need to give every user the rights needed to do his job, and we need also to take care that we need not to give him excessive rights, so we can don't give him excessive rights so he can mislead or he can misuse these rights. And we need also to monitor if we give him excessive rights or we give him a large rights or more rights that his job need. We need to monitor the using of these rights through event log in Windows, and in applications also we need to have a way to monitor and record the logs of this user that have excessive rights on the application. So we need to have something like this. We need to have in your IT department, we need to inventory of your different softwares and applications and see the rights or the built-in groups in every operating system and every application, see the default groups in it, and see the different rights assigned to these groups, and revise these rights and revise the members that are in this group that are granted these rights, and change them as needed. Maybe a user is changed from account payable to account receivable, so we need to remove account payable rights on the application or the financial system and give him account receivable rights. So all of these should be done and monitored, and stressing on you need to have a documentation, a printed documentation of all of the rights for the different roles in your environment, every job, and you need to have a job description. So how we know the rights to assign to a user? Based on his job description. So account payable, we know that he need to issue invoices, so then he should be assigned the right to issue invoices on the financial application, and the financial application should provide me this right to give it to the user. So this is basically what we call access control management, not account control management, access control management. So here we are stressing on access rights, or the access in general, controlling the access to resources. Let's see this, controlling the access to resources. We need to control the access to resources, monitor the access to resources, okay, and you do this by monitoring the rights to access resources, okay. So I think this is basically what these points talk about. In the upcoming video we will talk about vulnerability management, how we can vulnerability management process, how we can scan and monitor and protect ourselves against vulnerabilities. We need to have a process for discovering vulnerabilities, a process for fixing your vulnerabilities, a process for documenting these vulnerabilities for future reference. Hope this video is helpful to you all, and thank you all for viewing. Thank you so much.